Thank you for joining us for the Journey of Development. The goal for our program is to facilitate a meaningful learning experience and discussion that is engaging and insightful. The format for our event will allow each panelist to share their experience on the topic of workforce agility. Our panelists will share their experience and insights into how to help employees be positively engaged in complex, rapidly changing conditions. Before we start with our panelists, I would like to introduce myself and Scrimmage. As a continuous learner, I feel engaged and empowered learning from the experience and wisdom of others, and created the Journey of Development as a way for me to continue my own personal development while also supporting others with their development growth. As Director of Business Development for Scrimmage, I work with organizations to support the employee journey from onboarding through their entire employee lifecycle. Scrimmage is not only an early innovator of learning technology, but also a leader in the field. The Scrimmage platform is a secure enterprise mobility ecosystem built to engage, motivate, and create connection across the organization for more meaningful interactions, greater proficiencies, and overall work performance. You can check us out at wescrimmage.com, or let me know if you're interested in learning the results you can achieve with Scrimmage after our program today. And our first panelist is Craig Stevens. Craig is a lifelong learner in all things change. As a consultant, he has worked with over 100 different organizations of all sizes in all kinds of environments, including military and civilian, commercial and government, services and manufacturing, and nonprofits. He has served in environments such as healthcare, science and engineering, hospitality, waste management and environmental restoration, real estate and construction, security, energy, nonprofits, education, faith-based, and others. He has taught graduate and undergraduate courses at several different universities and corporate workshops for professionals training organizations. Craig is a world-class artist in oils and acrylic, an author and a speaker on excellence in management, and an entrepreneur. With that, Craig, would you like to take it away?
Sure. All right. So I'm probably approaching this whole concept of positively engaged employees from a totally different point of view. I'm a systems engineer by training, and I've developed these 5 link management models, we call them, from a different point of view. I started this one for the Department of Energy. So we're going to go into this, and we're just going to walk through this like it was a video. We're going to do it very quickly. So the first one is the 7 attributes of excellent management. And so found after much research that there's really 7 attributes you have to master in order to have excellent management. And these 7 attributes lead to excellence and change management. So this whole approach is related to change management. First step is always start with leadership, and that drives culture. So I could go on with the others, but we're going to do this very quickly. I think I have 8 minutes. So if we're thinking about leadership, that's a place you start. And what we're talking about when it comes to people and organization is empowerment. So I go back to science, and science tells us, Likert, as in the Likert scale, tells us favorable attitudes toward organizations helps build high-producing organizations. High sense of involvement from employees, high-producing organizations. Organizational effectively harness motivational concepts leads to high producing organizations, tightly knit functional society, social system, and all those things. Well, if Captain Obvious was here and he was talking about Likert and his study, it would say subordinates react favorably to experiences which they feel are supportive and contribute to their sense of importance and personal worth. And also they react negatively if it doesn't. So let's go and see a picture of what that might look like. If you were to look at a bell-shaped curve with employees, sometimes you might look at this, they're superstars, above average, below average, and some people you might even have to help them tie their shoelaces. And mostly, if you don't treat the employee workforce well, then these are the first to leave. Now on paper, that looks good because your cost went down, your productivity went up, but fear is high. And when I was talking to NASA, they said, well, we kind of work that way, but ours looks more like this. this is the people they lose first. They lose the people in the middle. These are people who do all the work in the government and NASA. These people are doing interesting things. They're manipulating space rovers, you know, on Mars. And these people, they couldn't get rid of if they had to, because that's part of what they're there for, is to provide services to people who can't find jobs other places. That's the way some of the government organizations see themselves. Well, the next model is we take the excellence in leadership and culture and you create a vision. And I'm not going to go into this one, but this is the Storms of Chaos model, and this is communicating that vision. In order to have engaged employees, they have to know what good looks like. They have to know where you're going. They have to understand the strategy and how to get there. So the next model we're going to look at, and that is related to the drivers of change. Whenever you make a change, there's other things that change with it. These are secondary changes. So you can think of this as a pinball machine. If you make a change in people, you're going to affect systems. You're going to affect internal environment. You're going to affect organizational structure. You're going to affect your external environment. If you make a change in systems, the same thing happens in a different way. But we're going to focus on organizational structure. So more science, Tom Burns and Stalker said it this way: if you want a stable environment and you want that that's stable demand, low technology, all these things, then here's how to do it. You get a centralized decision making, you get production controls, job descriptions, emphasis on the chain of command, rules geared toward efficiency and minimization. Unfortunately, that's not even relevant anymore. So if we want a changing environment, here's how you do that. That's fluctuating demand, moderately changing environment. Job not rigidly defined. That works well. They're more general and flexible. There's communication outside chain of command tolerated. Coordination is aided by committees, and there's emphasis on response to customer need. Well, that sounds closer to what we want, but in a innovative environment, that's where change happens on large scale, and it's very dynamic. You can't see it coming. You don't know when it's happening. It says, in order for that to work well, here's what works well. Goal-oriented versus task-oriented, flexible structure. Communications are intense and allow quick response outside of the chain of command. Few rules. So to me, that sounds like what we're trying to do. We're trying to create engaged employees in rapidly changing environments. But there's more to that picture. I'm a systems engineer, so I think in a systems approach. So the next thing is systems thinking. Systems thinking is complex. Everything in your organization reacts and relates to everything in your organization. We can simplify it by pointing to these 5 and working around these 5 of the drivers of change. But to give it an example of what that is, there's all kinds of archetypes when you think about systems thinking. And the one most people know about is the tragedy of the commons. You can think of the tragedy of the commons as something like this. You build it and they will come. But as they come in great numbers, more than you expected, and they break down the system. So as we go through our change curve, then it looks really great, but eventually it breaks down the system. Example of this might be, let's redesign our organization so that the project management office is a central location and it works throughout the whole company. Well, the ones that are closest to that benefit well, but the organizational elements that are further away doesn't react as well. And so over time, you're losing out on maybe some of the sales, profit, and other growth things that go on. So the bottom line is a systems approach is very important when you think about change. And the last thing is the change curve itself. So harnessing the 3 phases of excellent change. All of this happens together and continuously for every change. But here's the way I look at it. You're going from a caterpillar through a metamorphosis and a major step change, and you're turning into a butterfly. Well, this natural cocoon stage, some people call it the valley of despair, but I don't like that because I think some changes you really want to happen, you're excited about, but every change has a return on investment. It has a learning curve, and some of it has a valley of despair. And what you do to harness this is you take those 7 attributes of excellent management and you make a complete cycle. You apply that before, during, and after. And there's actually two more phases. It's way before and way after. And way before, you can develop the systems to help you through a change, and way after, you're concentrating on the sustainability. So if we were to go back, it all ends up back to this 7 attributes. They're in balance like this mobile, and if you remove any one of these, it's out of balance and it's broken. And most people make mistake because they start from performance measures, the systems and processes and continuous improvement, then to core competencies, then to people, then to customers. You have to go from leadership, culture, customer focus, then people, their core competencies, their systems, processes, then you measure. And that's it in a nutshell. That's it in 8 minutes, I hope.
Wow, that was a lot really quick.
Yep.
I love it. Thank you, Craig. And we're going to move into our next panelist, Rebecca. She is starting as an administrative assistant and now, or started out as an administrative assistant and now as a consultant. Rebecca consistently looks for ways to advocate for employees throughout her professional career, eventually finding her home in organizational effectiveness and change management. Rebecca has turned her passion into a full-time job. As the daughter of 2 psychologists, authors, and speakers, she is inclined to seek to connect to those that she works for and with. This summer, Rebecca launched her LLC, Ultim Consulting, which is geared towards helping small businesses navigate change. In her spare time, Rebecca is a cyclist, an endurance athlete, and volunteers in underserved communities in Baltimore. With that, Becky, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And I think Craig might be a tough act to follow, especially since my laptop, when I booted it up this morning, gave me the blue screen of death. So I sadly do not have my slides to share with you. So you're just going to have to stare at my face for a little bit, and I will talk you guys through a little bit of what I'm doing both on a large scale when it comes to employee engagement and culture, and also what I'm doing with a couple small businesses with my Ultim Consulting. Currently, I consult with T. Rowe Price as well. So for me, it's important when I'm talking about a topic such as engagement and culture and change management to really understand the why behind it. Because when I can understand that why and wrap my head around it, I can explain it better to people, I can make my case for change more effectively, and I can really help kind of change people's hearts and minds as I'm kind of working through these different efforts. So I thought that I would provide you guys a little bit of that why background for why engagement is such a pervasive topic in recent years. And I promise that this will not turn into a history lesson, but our journey does start in 1933. There was a large recession, as you know from the history books, and unemployment rates hit a staggering 25%. So this meant that job seekers, which was a massive, massive pool of them, were taking any job that came their way. They were searching for a paycheck. This was not a, let me understand what this company does and how I can contribute and how this will bring fulfillment to my life. That was not the case. This was, I need a paycheck, I need to put food on the table, and competition is stiff and it is fierce. So this started in 1933 with that 25% unemployment rate, and it carried through probably until the early 1990s. And what we call that piece is the age of obligation. So it's important to remember that a lot of people in their workforce grew up in this age of obligation, and that is where their careers truly grew. And so I want you guys to keep that in mind as we kind of go back and through, you know, the engagement efforts later on, but this age of obligation was very, very pervasive. So the late 1990s then started, and what really triggered this, what we're entering the age of choice. What triggered this was this massive technology company boom. It blew open the door on new skill sets. You know, new specialties were coming out of the woodwork and continue to do so. Unemployment rates began to drop. And now, as you guys know, they are the lowest that they have been in 18 years at 3.9%. So what does this mean? This means that we have jobs being created, We have employment and talent gaps to fill, and our pool is limited. So competition now is looking the other way, whereas before it was, people trying to grab onto jobs. Now it's companies trying to grab onto top talent. And so this means that we're having to offer things that we never had to offer before. It's no longer this, hey, you're getting a paycheck and you can deal with whatever political nonsense we have going on in the background that you may not agree with. Now it is this is what we can offer you. This is how we align to what you're looking for. And the script has been flipped. And it's very difficult for some of our tenured, senior managers to kind of wrap their heads around why engagement is so important, why culture is so important, and why you may get some resistance as you're moving through these efforts. Because they might have been on that tail end of that age of obligation where they just stayed with their company. They didn't see those perks. That wasn't on their radar. And so as you're kind of like launching these engagement efforts and you really want to make sure that your top talent stays and making sure that you're offering to your prospective new employees what they can grab and hold on to have an enduring career with your organization, you need to make sure that your upper management understands that this is a new age. This is the age of choice. It is no longer the age of obligation, and that times are changing rapidly with this and will continue to do so if employment rates are going to continue to drop, which there is some question about whether another recession is coming up, but I digress. So what I want to talk about now is 2 examples of engagement efforts that I've done. One is on a global organization scale, and one will be with a small business that I recently completed. And Nicole, please feel free to cut me off if I'm running over. I have not been looking at the time, so my apologies. So one of our global organizations that I was working with, they were really having issues with understanding how they could better engage their employees and where should they even start. And, for me, I try to drive home that employee engagement and employee culture doesn't mean a monthly birthday cake and a pulse check survey annually to understand how satisfied employees are. That's not true employee engagement. I think that some of these things could help eventually, and they do kind of help keep, people talking, but when we're talking about employee engagement, we're going back to that age of choice, and we need to tie together what they're looking for in an organization and what the organization is looking in for them. So I asked the question, and I'm sure all of you on this phone, if you have been interviewing or if you've ever been interviewed, you've most likely been asked the question, why us? Why are you choosing us? And so I asked this global organization, I said, well, what do you do with that information after your applicant tells you, after your top choices tell you why they chose your organization? And the recruiter or the hiring manager generally says, well, it's we just want to make sure that they did their homework, that they know a little bit about us. And I say, okay, then what do you do with that information? And they said nothing. And I said, okay, this is what you're going to do first. You are going to start tying your engagement efforts with your new employees into your recruiting process. You're not only going to ask that question on the recruitment level, you're also going to be asking that question on the hiring manager level. Once you pick out your top candidate who you're going to offer the job to, you're going to loop back to that question. And hopefully the candidate has come back with a response of, I really love your core mission and I like all of your philanthropic efforts and, the work that you do in the community is amazing. And that really spoke to me, and that's why I want to work at the company. You are then going to take that answer and build it into your onboarding process. Get them included in clubs and organizations or contacts throughout the organization that works with those types of programs that your top talent just said that they loved about the organization. And that's going to help to keep them invested and engaged. And they're going to be able to pull back and say, you know what, I'm a part of this. And this is what I love to do. And I'm doing work that I care about. So you can start that at a very, granular level when you're doing a recruiting process. So that's one example there. And then I'll get into my small business example. which is a company that does about $6 to $8 million a year. It's called Annapolis Boat Sales down here in Maryland, and I'm sure that they'll appreciate that plug. And I was talking to the owner, and he said, you know, we used to have a very family atmosphere, and we just don't have that anymore. And I don't know what's happening, and my employees are kind of dropping off, and they're not engaged, and I don't know what's going on. And, you know, I did a survey, and all the responses come back, and they say that everything's fine, but I can just feel it. The atmosphere is different. The vibe is different. And so I looked at Walter and I said, you know, let's take a look at your mission, at your values. And it turned out that they didn't have a mission statement. They didn't have their core values. They didn't have anything like that, which is fine for a small business. Sometimes you won't see that. But what we did for an employee engagement perspective is I said, Walter, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have an offsite meeting with your whole team, and we are going to come up together with them their mission statement. And you're going to ask them advice about what your core pillars are, because these are long-term employees. They've been with you for 7 years. So let's say, as a service member, I want to do X, Y, Z. And you're going to source all of your employees, see what they say. And from that, you'll get your core values. And from that, they will say, I built that. I helped do that. I love this. This is a family. I am a part of this. So that's what we were able to do on a smaller scale. Sometimes that type won't work with a larger organization because, you know, the political aspect and what they stand behind can be a little bit more pervasive. But there's so many different values that you can go with this, and the value add that engagement and culture brings is substantial, and it's unending, and your employees are your biggest advocates. And if you can advocate for them and make sure that they're being heard and do it in a transparent manner, if you even just start there, that's going to take you very, very far.
Awesome. I'm loving the different perspectives. This is great. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
You got it.
Next, we have Deidre Welcome. She is the founder and CEO of Concerning Learning LLC, who is a certified professional in learning and performance, certified professional in training management, and a Kirkpatrick Bronze Level certification credential holder. She has trained thousands of people in corporations, nonprofit entities, and government agencies on business, human resources, equal opportunity and equal employment opportunity, and leadership development topics to achieve improved organizational and individual performance. Deidre is the author of Don't Get Left Behind and founded the Extraordinary Learning Academy, where she trains other trainers to design, develop, and deliver inspiring, engaging, and actionable learning experiences.
Thanks, Nicole. Well, I appreciate and have learned so much from the first two presenters, Craig and Rebecca, and I definitely have learned and broadened my perspective on workforce development and workforce agility specifically. So I just wanted to, Nicole, should I share my presentation first before you do the poll?
That's up to you.
Okay, so let's see. Actually, I'll just go from where we are right now. And then after the poll, we can do the presentation. So my perspective was, how do you demystify workforce agility? Because it was something that I was not that familiar with, but I was really intrigued by the topic because I talk a lot about learning agility and I teach people how to do that. And so I wanted to know, okay, so how do I utilize my knowledge and experience and expertise in learning agility and transfer that to workforce agility? So I just had two particular poll questions to ask you, just to find out where you are and get a snapshot of how your company is doing so far with workforce agility. And so the first poll question is, in my company, we have the right mindset to respond quickly to business needs. And I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
the responses are coming in now. We've got 30%, 38% strongly agree, 38 at agree, 25% disagree, and 13 at strongly disagree.
Okay, so that means that we're all over. We're at different levels of maturity as we talk about workforce agility, but there's always room for improvement. And so let's go to the second poll question, which is, in my company, we have the right tools and processes to respond quickly to business needs. And I'll give you a chance to respond to that as well.
So we have, I launched them both at the same time, so I apologize. We've got 27% strongly agree, 27 agree, 9% neither agree nor disagree, 27% disagree, and 18 strongly disagree.
Okay, so there's lots of room for improvement in terms of our processes, and some room for improvement is in terms of aligning what we do in our workforce with the business need. So thank you, Nicole, for sharing that poll and the results to the poll questions. Okay. So what exactly is workforce agility? As I stated before, I was more intrigued with the concept and did some research so that I could really talk about and make it practical for those people who are not as familiar with it as others. So I looked at a particular, I was trying to find the real definition of workforce agility, and this is the one that I came up with. This is one that captures the ability to rapidly change and adapt to changes within the work environment. But for me, it was missing a couple of key concepts. The more I researched, the more I realized that it's a little bit more than change and adapting to change. So of course, me being the trainer and the learner, passionate learner that I am, I created my own definition. And so this definition is workforce agility occurs when business leaders implement a people-focused culture while using technology to enable its employees to rapidly change and adapt to those changes within the work environment. And so for me, this really captured the concept of, which Craig did an excellent job explaining, of leaders have to be a part of workforce agility and drive it. And also it has to be focused on the people, which Rebecca did an excellent job of explaining employee engagement and why it's so important to have workforce agility in order to keep your people and employees engaged within the organization. So why do we care? Why is workforce agility important to an organization? So I found 4 reasons why organizations should care about workforce agility. The first one is, in order for organizations to stay competitive, they must prepare their employees and focus on their people. And people, when I say people, it encompasses leaders, employees, internal and external customers. And so it's really important to stay people focused in order to stay competitive, which is why one of the reasons why workforce agility is so important. Another reason why organizations should pay close attention, and as Rebecca did an amazing job explaining, is to keep their employees engaged. And businesses that are focused on their people and enable their people with technology are way more productive, efficient, effective. They have less turnover, and they have higher levels of customer satisfaction. There's a definite correlation between employee engagement and investments in employee development. So that's the second reason. The third reason why workforce agility is important is to achieve better results. No longer can organizations just focus on cutting edge technology and using that as a differentiator between other organizations and companies. They need to be more focused on the people, and high performing organizations, and those organizations and companies that thrive are those that focus on their people, and they're the ones that do not fall behind. And the fourth reason is reduced turnover. And that speaks for itself. The less turnover you have less turnover when your employees feel valued and they feel like you're making investments in their success. So as we need to keep focused on and make sure that our leaders within our organization, those C-suite executives, drive and champion the idea and the concept of workforce agility, because the environments are always changing, but they need to be able to equip their workforce with the tools and the resources to keep pace with those changes. So they definitely need to be champions of workforce agility. So the last point I want to make is, how do you develop workforce agility? So we talked about what it is, why it's important. Now I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about and give you 6 quick reasons why or how to develop workforce agility within your organizations. The first way is to do a C-suite assessment. Evaluate the maturity, the workforce maturity levels within your organizations. Make sure you look at the culture, the values, systems, and processes to determine the gaps and where you can make improvements. It's really important that you do this and assess where you are in terms of workforce agility. The second way is to redefine the workforce. And this just shows you how we're moving from employees having defined schedules, work schedules, to more diverse work schedules. We need to adopt ways of them having role-based work versus project-based work. And we also need to make sure that we have some flexibility in where they do the work, because no longer are they just confined to the company walls. We need to embrace workforce, virtual employees working remotely anytime, anywhere. The third way is to look ahead, forecast future workforce needs using predictive analytics. We need to be able to scale our workforce to meet the future demands. In addition to looking ahead, we need to look inside of our organizations to tap that talent that already exists. Focus on ways of reskilling our existing employees for future and new job technologies. Also aligning the projects with the talent and creating platforms where they can customize their learning journeys. And that just means making sure that they have the right skills for the job that they're doing at that moment and in the future. They also need to look outside of the organization. And this is the 5th way. And it really is just outsourcing that talent to fill those internal skill gaps or internal gaps. You can look at freelancers, machine capital, which could be robots, different types of technology, but you still need the people to manage and run those and operate those machines. And also digital job markets. And that's just 2 that come to mind are Upwork and Trainers and Consultants Network, where you can find talent, specific skills that you need to fill those internal gaps. And lastly, embrace technology, welcome it. Find a way to adopt a healthy attitude towards technology. And this is the concept that grabbed me the most, was people are enabled, not replaced by technology. So you hear a lot of fear around the machines are going to replace the people. Not necessarily. One company that we're all familiar with, Amazon, in 2016, they went from 30,000 robots to 45,000 robots in 1 year. And then what it caused them to do was have to hire 50% more people to be able to manage and operate those machines. And that's my spin on workforce agility and how it can be used and managed within an organization.
Awesome. I just having the different perspectives has my mind going in a variety of different ways. One of the things that I'd like to do is, now that I know, Craig, you kind of started it out, and then we went through this progression, and everyone had this unique tone to your conversations. I'm wondering if, as you saw the other Rebecca and Deidre share their perspectives, did that make any change in your mind on some of what you went through?
Well, are you talking to me, Craig, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, what I've done, and just give a little bit of background. So I've spent over 30 years consulting and over 30 years in graduate school and over 20 years teaching, in universities, just basically moonlighting while working full-time jobs. And so the one thing that I always try to do is take little bits and pieces of whatever I can learn and apply it to the whole systems approach. So I'm constantly changing and constantly adding to, and I always reference where I hear it from, because I think that's how you grow. And so yes, I think that one of the things that Deidre mentioned that I fully agree in, and that is that the changing economy and the changing environment and the changing of people and the changing of philosophies and everything is always affecting what we do related to how we approach a change and how we approach engaging people in that change. And people are very important, but I'm sure I'll gather a bunch of little nuggets I can plug into the whole systems approach.
What would you guys, we do have a question came in. I'll skip my thought there. What are some strategies you can share to make a strong business case to gain buy-in from the CEO and second, the company?
Well, I think that the bottom line's usually cash, So can we show that we're either going to, because that's what the business is there for, right? Make cash, make a profit, and that helps the stakeholders, and whether it's the employee or whoever else, the employee wants a stable environment too. So how does this affect my bottom line? And I think that's always the first way to go. And I think that anytime you, I gave you one of the slides where it showed the bell-shaped curve. Well, a lot of times what people think affects the bottom line will have a long-term negative effects on bottom line. And so I think to look at the benefit analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and how it will change over time is real important to bring it to the CEO's attention. So that's just a first thought I had.
Hi, this is Deidra. I also wanted to elaborate on what Craig said, because I completely agree with him that it all goes to the bottom line. I mentioned those 4 reasons why organizations should care. So if you let them know, if you talk in the business language and be a business partner, and you let them know, in order for us to stay competitive, in order for us to have engaged employees, have less turnover, and have better results, this is something that we need to focus on and make sure we have a comprehensive strategy to keep our workforce nimble and able to change, adapt to change, plan for change, and be successful in the future and today.
Yep, and I think Deidre just kind of took the words out of my mouth there. But yeah, and aside from cost obviously being a huge driver when you get to that C-suite level, they also want to know, why is this important? Aside from the monetary amount, why is this important? So if you're going to, the CEO, president, that upper level, why is it important? What can they expect? And so that's what you also want to come at them with is I'm coming to you with this because it is critical to X, Y, and Z, like Deidra just said. And the second piece of that, when it comes to how can you get buy-in from the rest of the company, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. Something that I did in a previous role that was rather successful is whenever we had like a new change effort coming up, or there were just changes in the organization in general. Oftentimes people use change agents across the organization to kind of help drive that adoption of this effort forward a little bit more. I did something a little bit different with a previous organization, and I had these change ambassadors, and I did this call for volunteers. And it wasn't a voluntold situation. It wasn't managers cherry picking people that they believed would be the biggest asset in this, but it was an open call. We wanted to make sure that people were volunteering to kind of help out with change initiatives and with changes in the workforce, and to kind of help navigate their peers and providing that peer-to-peer support through these different types of organizational, cultural, people, technology, and process changes, we wanted them to volunteer so that they'd be more invested. Again, it kind of goes back to that engagement and buying into the company again. And so with those change ambassadors, you can kind of, socialize this different type of change that you're going through, whatever that may be. But that's one way of doing it, is just getting your peers involved with it. That's the best way to get buy-in, is get your peers involved, get their feedback.
It makes it a lot easier if the culture is pushing for it. So that's a good point that Rebecca made.
Definitely. What would you say to the organizations that aren't quite as transparent, don't really support as much of that socialize and openness? How do you combat that? How do you get that to turn around? Because I think that sometimes from an employee perspective, that can actually be part of what's overwhelming in that change cycle.
This is Deidre. I really think that trust is the underlying issue that needs to be addressed when you have organizations that may not be as transparent as others. When employees feel like they have a say, when they see managers or management C-suite walking the talk, those are actions and behaviors that invite employees to feel open and feel comfortable with communicating within the organization. So I would say that they really need to focus on the perception of management and what are they doing? What are they doing? What actions are the employees seeing? And are they really saying things? And is their message clear with their actions?
Yeah, and that's one of the sad things too, is that, leadership has to be involved and they have to drive it. If they don't want to drive it, it's not going to be driven. And if organizations aren't designed to capitalize on it, then it's going to be very hard. But usually the CEO, the people in charge, have people they do listen to, and they do respond to well, and there's others that they don't. And so if you can make your case to those that can build the momentum to change maybe a leader's opinion, then that will go a long way, because there's a lot of risk on the leader's point of view for accepting something that's new and unusual to them. If they grew up watching John Wayne, then they're going to think that's the way the leader has to be. And so it's, building that momentum may be slower than you think, but that cost-benefit analysis goes a long way to changing those opinions.
Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Craig and both Deidre had two different views on that also align very well. I think it's pretty spot on. I would just say the one thing that struck me when Craig was talking, and how for those organizations that aren't necessarily as transparent, and that puts a lot on leaders, and they view it as a risk when these types of change efforts pop up. How is this going to make me look? And sometimes what that turns around to is it almost goes hand in hand with organizations that have a lack of accountability. They may say that they hold people accountable. They may say that they're a transparent organization, but generally when you lack one, you're going to lack the other. And so it's, like Craig said, it's a slow burn with that. And it's a slow pace to kind of change that around. But if you have people within the organization that can champion that and that can manage that up and set the expectations, management, this is what you can expect. Here's the value add behind that. This is how low cost it's going to be, and this is how it's going to save us money in the future. It's going to go a long way. And I think organizations, even large ones such as T. Rowe Price, where I'm working now, is making larger transparency efforts. I mean, this is a global organization, and they understand that transparency is something that employees absolutely need to see. They crave it, and so do their clients. And so that ties also back to Deidre's slides, where you get increased productivity from engagement, from transparency, from accountability, and that in turn increases client satisfaction and uptick in revenue. So it all ties together, and you can kind of bring that to your CEO, to your management, and say, these are the benefits if we start doing this.
Yeah, that reminds me of something too, Rebecca, and that was one of my mentors was Dr. Jerry Westbrook. He had a whole bunch of things he did. But one of the things he did is he looked at those 7 attributes I was talking about, and he found that no company are the limiting factor on how well companies accepted change was tied into the culture. So the culture would drag it either up or drag it either down, either one way or the other. And so it was a limiting factor. If you can get the culture from the top down and the bottom up to be in the same direction, going the same way, then that makes the biggest impact, and that's the hardest thing to change.
And it made me think of a quote that you hear quite often is that which we fear we create. So by fearing having that openness, it actually is creating that reverse result they're looking for. I'm wondering if you could dig a little bit more. I think sometimes people get stuck on how to really start the cost benefit analysis, especially with something that they haven't approached before. How would you suggest that they start such a process? I know that we had a discussion on return on investment a few months ago that might be helpful in that, but I'm just wondering if you have any tips or ideas for people that really trying to present that whole analysis is sometimes a bit of just getting started is tough.
I often use what's called remedy selling. And I'd have to do that a lot of times within learning and development. So when I'm doing performance consulting and I need to talk to the executives or the leaders in the organization and explain to them why it's important for me to do an analysis and really understand what's going on before we actually determine if the solution is training or if it's something else. And so I kind of presented it as, if we don't do this, then this is a possibility. If we don't do this, then this may happen. And a lot of times when you do that, they really start to understand, oh, wow, so we really do need to do this, because if we don't, our employees are going to go out the door. They're not going to feel valued. They're not going to be prepared to achieve the mission, which impacts the bottom line. So that's just something that I always use is remedy selling and explaining to them and allow them to come up with the answer and see it for themselves, that this is something that really they need to pay attention to and invest their time and energy in.
I always say, that the curve with the bell-shaped curve again, I always make the point that, on paper, doing the wrong thing looks like the right thing, because if you just get rid of the expensive people, it looks like you saved money. If you just don't maintain your equipment, it looks like you're saving money. But on the long run, this is going to ruin you. This is going to ruin your equipment. And making the analogy, I remember having an argument with somebody one time about cost-benefit analysis of maintaining equipment, for example. And the bottom line is, if you don't change the oil in your car, your car is going to break down. Same way happens in your organization. If you don't go through the processes of maintaining, goodwill and other things, then eventually that engine comes to a stop. And, on paper, it may look like exact wrong thing to do, but it's the long-term sustainability is what you have to sell.
Rebecca?
I think Deidre and Craig got it. They covered all those bases. I think the one thing I would add is just kind of build off what Craig said, is that long-term sustainability. That's important, and that's a very strong case for change. And anytime you can show what it will provide them down the line, even though they might not be seeing immediate results once implemented, it's that long term that you really need to sell. And there's a lot of great ways of doing that. I mean, LinkedIn is a amazing resource to kind of find different tools to help you present business cases in case for change. That's always an excellent place to go look for resources.
Awesome. We don't have any other questions coming in, so I'm going to let you each take a moment if you'd like to share just a quick synopsis, any additional feedback or thoughts that come to mind as we wrap up today. And we'll go ahead and start with Deidre this time.
Okay, I would just encourage everyone to really do some research for their own and find out, how does workforce agility look within their organization, and what are some things that they can do and adapt it to what's going on specifically in their organizations, because the topic is so broad and it can go in, as you've heard, 3 different directions, and I'm sure there's many others. It's really important to make sure that whatever you're doing around the topic, that it fits within your organization.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I think what best fits your organization is a very strong piece there. As I bounce around doing some consultancy work, I know that what works one place is not necessarily going to work at another place. You need fresh perspective. So as you look at your own organization, that's a key piece right there. Another thing that I would add, and this it came from both Craig and Nicole when you guys were talking about quotes, and Craig's mentor and Nicole, what you were talking about, fear being a driver. My mentor, Miss Barbara Dreyer, she gave me 2 quotes that have stuck with me through my professional career. And the second one is a bit more of a chuckle, but the first one is encourage fearlessness. And that is a great way to kind of help spread that culture change around. Encourage fearlessness. Get people talking about new ideas. And I know that it can be difficult at organizations that have been fairly stagnant. It may push back a little bit. You may find those resistors. But encourage it. Continue to talk about it. Encourage that fearlessness, and you will eventually see results. And that's something that I've done in every organization. And I'm proud to kind of pass that piece of advice along. And the other second piece of advice she gave me that has also stuck with me is don't be pathetic. That is basically that is something that she told me, and it stuck with me, and it has given me a confidence and a courage as you walk into meetings, as you walk into the CEO, as you're talking to your peers. Have that confidence. You can do this. There's no reason why you cannot. And you just, those are 2 that I would just like to pass along as well.
Those are great.
Yep. I
Right.
think to add on to that, it sounds like Rebecca's mentor was sometimes her tormentor too, and that's way a good mentor can be. Sometimes you have to be the mentor. You have to be the tormentor, where you just do that little nagging voice with the right science and right approach and the right gentleness to help others, be fearless. And I always tell people, everybody on my team, I say, your number 1 job is make everybody look good. You make your client look good. You make your boss look good. You make yourself look good. So, in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, I guess, is small people talk about other people, average people talk about things, and extraordinary people talk about ideas. So be that extraordinary person, be that mentor, and be that tormentor to keep the pressure on. And so I think that's what you can do.
I think that's awesome. That is awesome. Tormentor. That's gonna stick in my head now.
Very well said.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent of having people in your circle that are challengers, and I think that really fits that mold. If you're not challenged, you're not growing, and it's really important. At least to me, I think growth is very important. Well, I appreciate each of you for joining us today, and all of our attendees for joining in and asking questions. I wanted to share that our upcoming topics, we have talent acquisition. We're going to be talking about talent acquisition's impact on turnover on September 20th. And then in October, we're going to be addressing emerging technologies. What new technologies our panelists are implementing to enhance learning, communication, and/or collaboration in the workplace. So I think those conversations are going to be really exciting, and invite you to join us there too. And then something that Scrimmage has just released out today, we've got a free download for Essential Employee Onboarding Playbook. If you are interested in receiving that, you can just shoot me a message. I will also include a link for with the video of the event after today. So that'll be emailed out as well. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Save the upcoming dates. And if you have ideas for future topics or events you'd like to hear more about, let me know. I'm working on 2019 programming now. I hope you have an awesome day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.